Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Fatman Pates. It's Monday night in the UK. It's really sticky and humid and horrible. So I've got the windows open, so we'll see how infested we become with little moths and moths as we go through the painting this evening. Bit of a busy schedule. I want to wrap up the claws and hooves on my warriors. And I want to work on the mouths of the warriors as well. Also the mouths of the Hive Tyrant heads that we've nearly finished. And then the last thing I want to do on these guys tonight is just the toxin sacks around the base of the arms and the swords. And kind of pipes on there and clear those off. So they'll be kind of finished at that point. They'll then be ready for some work on the base. But that's probably going to be a tomorrow activity, I think. Once those guys are done, I'm doing some prep for my next painting cycle. So I'm looking at a few models that I'll need to get ready for the priming. So that's I'm going to start off with the Mawloc we have here. He's already fully built. We just need to go over and make sure that there's no seams that just need a little bit of work, nothing just out of the ordinary. Then start doing some decorating on the base so that those pieces will all get primed ahead of the build. Once he's done, I've got 6 Primaris Intercessors who all need a similar treatment. Just a quick check through, make sure that the barrels are drilled correctly, anything is just, all the seams are just addressed, all that kind of stuff, a little bit of basing work. And then finally, if we get those, I've still got some work to do on getting ready the inceptors and get these ready for priming. Now, these fellas are going to be a little more tricky to do. Because for the actual basing options we don't have a lot of touch points where we can put them on, so they'll probably get a little bit of super glue stuck on a little bit there, and we'll see how we work through with them. They've got a little bit more work to do, less pressing. My virtual playlist today is the Chameleons, probably my favourite band. Going in sort of a chronological album order, so we'll start with Script to the Bridge, move on to What Does Anything Mean Basically, and then wrap up with Strange Times. And then if there's anything else left at the end, we'll have some of the singles, some of the rarities, and I'll be popping onto my virtual playlist that you can pretend to listen to along with, because we're not allowed to include music on our Twitch streams, so never mind. Right, so onto the claws. So we do have a little bit of a recipe for these guys. I have already, for all the claws, the hooves, they've got a matte black base. They got a wash of Flesh Tearers Red contrast to just give them a little bit of colour, bit of flavour. And now I'm going to do some greys on these to kind of highlight and bring things up. So I'm going to start off with Vallejo Black Grey. This is going to be watered down a little bit, and I'm going to just take this to the last edges of the claws, of the hooves. For larger claws, so some of the really big ones, so for example if we have a look at our Mawloc here, so some of these large claws here, I would do an intermediate layer of some Vallejo dark blue grey as well, just towards the tips, again just to kind of make a look of them being sharp. But for these little fellas, they're not very big at all, the claws, so we don't need to bother with that one today. And then finally I'll do just a quick dry brush of Vallejo Pale Grey Blue, just to catch the edges of those claws, the hooves, just to kind of give a real highlight on the edge and make them sort of almost look a bit sharp. So those are the things we're working on. So we've got claws and hooves of the 3 warriors, plus his pointy tongue, and also one tongue on the Hive Tyrant head. Right, I've rearranged my lighting, so maybe this will be a little bit better. The camera still sucks. It looks so good when I don't do it within OBS, but we'll see where we go. I'm also going to try and zoom in a little bit and try and keep them on a little more in the centre, so that you might have a little bit more chance of actually seeing what I'm doing. So let's try zoom. We'll work from here and we will see where it goes. Right. of layer of black grey mixed up a bit. Give it a shake and a spin in the vortex. And we don't have a lot of models to paint here, so we don't need to do so much. Right, if I just grab a largest brush, just put some clean water on my piece of glass. This will be using my mixing palette for these guys. And then we just put a little bit of a layer on there. Typed up. So just mix these together so we get quite a thin consistency. We don't want this too thick on the model. We are just going to do a little bit just towards the end of each of these. Just a little kind of small dollop. Do the hooves last. Drag them. In these case, for these pieces are probably kind of just dragged from the last third, last quarter of the model piece. It's a little more than that. Never mind. There we go. It's fine. We've got everything. There's a bit of a claw here. Let's just get the bottom of the hooves as well then. I think he's about done. Catch the bottom. Oh yeah, that's one down. Move on to our second one. Same thing. A little bit of our diluted grey. Oh, I missed his tongue there. I need to do him separately. And we just pull a little bit of the grey. Just from the ends of the claws. Side. And the hooves. When I do the larger areas, I do tend to try and get a bit of feathering on there, so it's not all the solid colour. Let's do the last of the hoof. The paint mix right. does it tick on? Bugger off. There we go. Yeah, I think this one's done as well. Just double check we got our points. It's fine. Let's move on to our last warrior. Other side. Right, and then the hooves. And the last hoof we've got now. Just right, he's done. Little dots on the top of our Tyrant head. Just a little bit at the end here. Both sides. Bottom. There we go. And because I missed a tongue on this fella, I'm going to just go back and quickly go through the steps we need to do just to colour him up. So let me get a matte black. Probably come back to him once. We do some of the tubing work. Toxin sacks. So it's never a race with these. Well, sometimes it is if you must have things done for tournaments, but generally it's not really a race to paint these things. If you miss something or get it wrong, you know, take a breather, take a step back, come back and do it again. It's absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I'll take that back. Don't paint on the sprue. That's the wrong way. It's absolutely 100% the wrong way. Another day I'll go into why, but trust me, it is the wrong thing to do. Right, let's give that a moment to dry and we'll just do a second coat of black on there just to make it fine. For black I'm using a bit of contrast black Templar. It's quite thin. There we go. It's quite thin, but it does go on really, really nicely, and it's you can get a couple of coats on without too much trouble. I know it's not what it's meant for, but it does the job for me on these fellas quite well. And it's black. It's not like a super dark grey. No, it is. If you put on enough coats, it does give you a really solid, nice matte black. Cool. Okay, that's done. I don't need that one. Let that dry for a moment, and then we'll do a little bit of the Flesh Tearers red. That'll just again off colour the black, just give it a little more interest. It's a bit warm in here. Taking some liquid on. Suppose in many ways I don't use contrast paints quite as they're intended, and I just use them as the right colours and things I need to do. It's just like a bit too much. Yep, that's all we need. Seal up. Right, those are done. We'll just wait a moment, and then we'll just put a little bit of our Vallejo black grey on the tip, and then we're ready for the next phase, which is a little bit of dry brushing. So let's just wait a moment for that one, and while I wait for that one, I will have a bit of a top up of my liquid, which at the moment is a can of Thatcher's Gold with a pint of ice cubes. Nice and refreshing. Right. It's dried now, so it's dry enough. You can see the last bit of this. Just pop it on the end of that tongue, and we'll catch the highlights in a bit. I'll put him at the end of the list. We'll do him last for the dry brushing. Right, there we go. Let's clear up all unwanted paint. All done. One of the advantages of using a glass as this is it does clean up super easily. Let's just find a dry brush. That'll do. As I said, we're now going to do Vallejo Pale Grey. We're just going to do a little bit of this, just dry brush and highlight, and just catch the edges of those claws and the hooves. And then I'll really just kind of give a bit of a sharp edge to it, and it'll just make it look fine. So we're going to start on this one. I just need a little dot. A bit more. My piece of glass. As I said before, this piece of glass is just a glass from an old picture frame. So it's just brought out because it works really well as palette. It's non-absorbent, super smooth. It's easy to work with, and you know, at the end of the day, you can just throw it away if you break it or it gets too dirty or too scratched or anything like that. don't waste your money on the Citadel card mixing things. There are much better options out there. I am looking to get hold of a white ceramic tile at some point and use that instead. It'll be a little bit easier to see the mixing and going through. Right, so we've got our dry brush now. I'm just going to very, very lightly just catch the edges of these claws. Very, very lightly. Might not be able to show up too well through this rubbishy camera, but it is doing just what it's doing. It's just catching the edges of those claws, those bits, just makes them, gives them a bit of a highlight, just a little bit, just to accentuate that they're sharp. You don't want to be on the receiving end of them at all. Claws get a little more of a scrub just to get those right. Last inside of those. There we go. Simple as that. Let's move on to number 2. Same process. Dry brush. We're just going to catch the absolute edges. So very, very dry brush. We don't want a lot of paint to come out here at all. We really just want to just really, really catch the edges. So we draw it along where we can, right along the edges. Like the model detail, let the dry brush do the work for us. Our other little bits at the same time. Make sure we don't miss any. Scrub on the hooves as we did on the last one. Cool. Don't have much to do on this Hive Tyrant head. It's just touch the end of this guy's nasty looking proboscis type tongue, and we just let the model, the brush, do the job for us. There we go. And finally we have this fella. That's what we did. A lot of paint left there, but we don't need it. All good. Again, very light, just on the edges. for these guys. For this, just get a bit under there. There we go, and then again scrub on the hooves. Just move them in. And there we go. Give that brush a quick clean. Just put that away for the moment. I'm probably not doing too much dry brushing for a while. Of the paint off this one. We'll make sure we give it a good clean later on at the end of the session. Let's get rid of our wanted grey. Right, excellent. So the claws, tongues, those are all done on our warriors. Next thing I want to try and do is highlight some of the tubes and pipes that we've got on these fellas. So here, just towards the bottom of the bone swords, we've got these kind of like toxin sac type bits and pieces. I want to pull those out. Got a couple of like internal tubes going here through bits and pieces of the model. So I'm not on every side, but somewhere. So what I want to do is try and just pick out a couple of those just to give a little bit of interest in the model, just a little bit of variety. You don't have to do an awesome, wonderful job and get everything, but it is quite good if we can get several of those. So I'm going to go and switch to a particularly fine pointed brush for this one. I'm going to double O Windsor. Windsor and Newton. And for the tubes I'm going to use Vallejo Transparent Green. Now the reason I'm using this one is the work we've already done, those kind of light colours that are already on the model, they'll sort of shine through a bit, so it'll dilute the overall green effect and kind of mute it off a little bit. So just to kind of help make it a little less bright. It isn't that colour green when we come and paint it on the model and it finishes off. So let's get a little bit of this onto the table. And let's start. So I'm going to start on some of these tubing pieces that we can see. Because it's transparent, it is coming through quite nicely. And it's not overloading the style of the model too much. Fluff there. Right, let's go. Okay. I don't do this for all of the models, it's only on some, and only where there seems to be an appropriate tube or pipe that would benefit from a little bit of just highlighting and bringing it up, just to bring out the model, just break up some of this detail a bit. There we go, that's better. There we go, happy with that. We'll do the toxin sacks next. Maybe a bit tricky to see, but there's already shadow in here from the original painting process. So all I'm doing is just painting pretty much on the top of this towards the edges, but leaving a little bit, so only painting the raised bits of the model. I'm not painting in the recesses at all. Let the previous work stay there so we can keep that effect, keep that from our previous painting process, and not lose any of that detail that we've put in there. I'll say that now, that's until I mess up and splodge the paint on somewhere. Hopefully we can get away without doing that today. And this one, right, 2 more little dots on this side. A quick check if we're happy with how that is. Let's get this big one in the middle. No, that'll be fine. Now we've just got these toxin sack bits on the other side. So let's put all these in. The larger bits first, because I'm a coward. I don't do the little bits. I don't like doing the little bits at all. They all need to be done. A little more defined on the inside of this one than the other one. That'll do. Just a little bit of splotch of colour just to help pull things out. So right, let's do the same thing on this fella. Same weapon, same bone claws, bone sword, so same thing to do. Right, just back in one moment. Briefer moment than anticipated. There we go. Right, so let's go and do the same things with this model. A little bit of, just a very little bit of paint on the brush. Just pop it in here as we want to paint. This bit on the other one, so let's do it on here as well. visitor.
A visitor.
Yes. If you speak.
The visitor is leaving now.
If you speak, nobody will ever hear you because nobody watches.
I thought you had one person.
Well, I had one subscriber. But I very much doubt anybody's.
Subscriber is if they've...
No, that's right. A follower.
A follower.
You correct me. I have a follower who probably has no idea what they've let themselves in for. There we go.
Oh, I haven't logged into my Twitch on my phone. I can't check.
Never mind. It isn't an important thing, I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Joys of children and bedtime. No, that one is the one responsible for the Fat Man Paints logo that you may have seen. So she loves her art. She's very talented. And we're trying to encourage that whenever we can. A little better than I am. Let's be honest. Right. And in the mantra of painting, if you can't see it, it doesn't matter to paint it. No. You can't see it, don't fuss, because nobody else will see it. And when you're on the tabletop, which is what we're painting for, it really won't matter, because people won't be hovering over it with a microscope, camera zoom, pointing out all your little inconsistencies. So as I said, we're back in the first one of these. We're not painting for Golden Globe, Golden Demon, anything like that. We're here purely to have something that looks great on the tabletop, have fun painting it. And for me, this is a bit of motivation to just really clear down the backlog. Getting rid of all of the models that have sat in their grey stupor. Get them on the tabletop in full colours. Enjoy. A couple more little dots. Good enough. Good enough.
But you can say bumper bop.
Right. On to our last one. Got quite a few knobbles and pipes in here, so let's give a few of them a little bit of interest. Next up will be mouths. Which you may be surprised to hear does not involve any dry brushing. If you'll spend time with me, you'll find that dry brushing is one of my favourite techniques. It's a little bit lazy. But it gives really good results. And it does an excellent job of introducing contrast onto the models. At very little effort. And importantly for me, very little skill. Because if I can do it, you most certainly can. Alright, it's a little hard to get to the other side of those, so I'll only be doing the outsides for this one. Okay, and then the only thing left is I'm going to do a little bit on this big gum. I'll need a fine point for this one. I won't be doing all of these dots because some of them are just going to be a bit too small. Just trying to rank up the monotony of the colour. In a few minutes you'll probably hear a dog get very excited because he's about to go for a walk. So bear with the noise. Probably more interesting than listening to me waffle on anyway. So. Again, it's hard to tell because I need to take my glasses off to paint and I cannot see the screen to tell. Anyway, that's what it is. That's what we're going to have with that fella today. Again, we'll come and give these all a good clean later on. Clean up the green. Put that away. Excellent, right. So that's that done. So, what we've done our toxin sacks, we've done our claws, tongs, now we're moving on to the mouths. So we're going to start this off with Vallejo Pink. Bubblegum pink as a base colour for all of this. And we'll give us a good starting point, and then from there I tend to do a wash of Caribou Crimson shade, and that just will really kind of settle in the crevices, really tone down the pink. Gives it a nice kind of colour to sit in there.
Some things are just really crazy. Somebody won a French Scrabble tournament. They didn't speak French.
They just knew a lot of French.
They got an entire French in 9 weeks. People studied the English Scrabble dictionary for several years before they
Right.
could complete top level things. Like, he's won 5 world championships for Scrabble. Nobody else has won 2. He was like, I'm just going to do some French ones, so I need a challenge. That's what he said.
So let's start with the mouse. Let's start with one of these Hive Tyrant heads. Don't worry too much if you get some of this pink on the tongue, because we will be on the tongue, that's where we want it, on the teeth, because we will be painting those up in a few minutes as well. But do try and avoid the other bits of the head if you can. So that's the tongue done. Let's move on to the inside of the mouth as well. Many things. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Said before, my painting method is very forgiving. Anything we get wrong in one layer, we can fix in the next one. There we go. Very horrible bubblegum pink mouth that we will fix up in a few minutes. Right, I'm not happy with that. Let's top up my cider. Let's move on to the next mouth. Let's start with the tongue. These fellas' mounds are a little smaller, a little more tricky to do, but the principles are exactly the same. Let's try and just paint enough. Get the underside of that tongue. There that I missed. That's that one done. 2 more to do. Change that water in a few moments. Starting to look really quite grim. With the smaller models, painting the inside of the mouth is not generally necessary because you can't really see. As long as you get the tongue itself, that's good. And one more, and we'll let it dry. Come on and do the Caribou Crimson shade. I think that's all done. There we go. Right. Let's clear up the paint we don't need. I want to be putting my hand in that later. Making a mess. There we go. Right, I'm going to go and change the water now, so back in a moment or two. Okay, fresh water for our brushes, and time to do a little more work on these mouths now. Be working on the inside of them with a wash of Caribou Crimson Shade. So let's give it a good mix up. This one I'm using a, if I can find one, I'm going to use a slightly larger brush so I can get a bit more paint. There we go. A bit more paint on the bristles so that I can get a nice deep wash going in. Tone down that truly awful bubblegum pink. Starts with the first one we did. Nice bit of paint on the brush. Just take it all over all that area that we did pink. Just put a little bit on the edge of that spiky tongue. Let's get it all in the mouth because we can see this one. If we're not happy with it, we can always come and put a little bit more on, which I think I will on this one. Oh yeah, that's one down. Next head. Leading up that brush a bit, let's get quite a bit of shade paint into the model. Do its job, just settling all those recesses and let that shade and that darkness come through. There we go. That's the Warriors now. Good. There we go, and the last one, and then I'm going to have a look at the first one again, see where we go. That's all fine, and I just wanted to darken this one up, the very first one. Get a little more on him. go. Right, all done for those guys as well. So that is the mouth nearly done. And we have sort of pink tongues coming through, or pink mouths on all of these ones. Really helps add a bit of contrast again into the top half of the model. Right, we'll let that settle for a moment, and we'll move on to our last part, or penultimate part. So what I am going to do while those dry, I'm going to try my best to pop in the eyes for the... You can hardly see that. You know what? I can't see those, I'm not going to put eyes on there. Nobody's going to notice on these ones. I'm not going to bother with eyes. If I was going to do eyes, I'd have put Vallejo transparent orange in there. Again, like the green we did before, it just catches the colour, brings it up and helps. Right, just one moment. Right, sorry about that. So, I'm going to start on the teeth. I'm going to go the one that's been done. So teeth, paint we've used before. Pallid Wych Flesh, we use this as part of the dry brushing to bring up some of the accents and accentuate some of the elements on the flesh bits. And now we're just going to put some on raw, not dry brush, we're just going to very carefully paint some of these elements just onto the teeth themselves. I'm going to use a fine brush and just basically dub them on. So what we want to do is leave the colour that we've already got on the model that sits behind to give the contrast so that they all stand out on the model. This is very thick, it's like concrete, but I'm not going to worry too much about that one. What we're doing here, let's just get rid of some from the lid, because otherwise it's just going to go everywhere. Well, normally the mantra is thin your paints, but in this case we don't mind it being a bit thick. It will give a little bit of, if anything, a little bit of texture onto those teeth. It will just highlight them out a little bit. This is one where I might be a bit quiet as I try and concentrate not to screw up and get the paint where we don't want it. It's quite subtle, but I can see the difference here myself. I very much doubt you can see anything on the stream. I'll have to wait until the finished models get posted up on Insta, and then you can have a laugh at how bad it really is. What's up, Joe?
We open the door.
Yeah, what have you found?
Spider.
Spider!
Big one.
Big one you're letting outside.
Yeah. There he goes. You look much bigger on the wall.
Okay. A spider can go and carry on its merry life and eat outside. Right, got most of these done now. It is subtle, but you can't tell. Honestly, trust me. I suppose if I wanted more contrast I could use straight white, but I'm not a big fan of blacks and whites. They're just too extreme on their colours. Right, next set of teeth, less on this fella. You know what, I might give these eyes a go after all. I'm certainly on the Warriors thing. I can do these teeth. I can do the eyes. Let's come back to that in a minute after we've finished these. Doesn't need a lot. All very subtle. Paint clean. A little bit of a slip cider. How's that finished? time to thread the needle. Try and get these in the tricky part of the model. So sometimes I build in sub-assemblies, sometimes I don't. It really depends on the model. Most of the time the minimum sub-assemblies I would do is just keep the head separate, just so you can get into the nooks and crannies of the head covers. So for example, what we've done here with the Hive Tyrant heads. But other times it just build and paint. There's kind of a mantra: if you can see it, you can paint it. If you can't see it, it doesn't matter. It is a matter of preference though. I think if you're trying for your golden demon, it's a bit thick on there, and some careful sub-assemblies is the only way to go. You also need to bear in mind that if you are doing some sub-assembly work, is how do you get it all together in the end and not ruin your paint and make sure that everything flows. It's going along. The side, and we're nearly done. Oop, let's get inside. Very subtle, but done. Let's put it to the side. And then, let's see if we give these guys a go, these eyes a go. Not entirely convinced how we'll do. Let's do that, and I'll take a little bit of break. Find what my next drink is, and then we're going to go on to doing some model prep. So build, not paint. It's always a bit more than we needed. There's a bit of a blockage at the end, never mind. A prayer. See what we can do. One of the advantages for using transparent paints here is that if you get a slight overspill, it does actually just fall into the shadows of the model you've got. You can't tell that actually has come out okay. So much paint up there. That's right, yeah. last one. Got this as a bugger to get to. That's good. Can we see them on here? Not enough that I can be bothered. That's all good. Right. Clear that up. Let's do a quick time check. Right, where are we now then? It is... Oh, it's 10 to 11. How time flies when we're having fun. Let's zoom out a bit for our next bits and pieces. So, our warriors, our heads, I'm going to put those aside for the moment. Certainly the tyrant heads as well. These are, for all intents and purposes, finished now. I'll put these to the side when I have my next varnish seal session. These guys will be included in that one, so I'm going to put those over to the side. Next up, we're going to do some prep work on the Mawloc. There's a couple of steps we're going to do for this fella. First one is have a good look over the model, see if there's anything that I've missed in terms of tidy up and clean up, any seams that I need to just have a look at. Make sure everything is securely glued in, isn't going to come off during our painting process. Now this is a model that I would have separated the head from. As you can see, it's going to be quite tricky to get into those gaps, but it was assembled as it was. It was needed for a game, or it was wanted to be assembled by my son who plays. So that's where we're working from. We have them. This is how he is, so this is what I've got to work for. So first of all, a quick look round. Let's make sure that everything is okay. There's not any particular challenges from bits and pieces, no ungodly seams that are just going to really spoil the finished model. And normally I address those as part of the build, but sometimes you miss some, sometimes you're just busy and you just don't spot the things. So I think we're okay on this one. We're okay. So next up is what am I going to do for the base? A bit dusty. So it's quite a large base, but there's also a lot of model on that base. So I don't want to add too much into there to make it a little more tricky to paint and see. I have a process for building up and detailing bases for Tyranids. I have a bunch of little stones, unused infestation nodes, just little bits and pieces that can all get a bit of effort into here. So I'll have a look through there, see what we can find from there. And of course, we wouldn't be complete with a box of Citadel skulls. So we'll probably put one or two of those on there as well, and see how we progress with it. I do have some larger stones, probably not on this fella. We've got we don't have too many large areas to work from because of what it takes up. So I'm just going to go and get a beer because I want one, and then I'll come back and we'll do some work on this base and get him ready for the next phase. Okay, so my basing approach for Tyranids is effectively a two-step. In fact, it's part of the whole prep. We check the model, make sure that everything is good, no rubbish seams, things are filled, everything's attached. Then I attach some of the more permanent elements to the base. So I'll use plastic glue, attach the skulls, I'll use super glue and attach any stones or other elements I want. Let that all settle, then it gets a gentle wash in some warm soapy water. That will release all the grease that I've put on when I've been building the model and touching it. It'll clear off all that dust that's gathered on there. It'll just give everything a nice clean one. Once it's dry overnight, I'll then attach it to a handling board, sort of a piece of wood or something else, so that I don't have to touch any of the model at all when I'm painting it. I will then use some technical paints. This is specifically for our Tyranids. I'll use some technical paint, probably some Armageddon dust. I'm just checking my notes, just to add a bit of texture onto this. You can use PVA glue with a bit of white sand in there, a bit of sand in there. Other things just to kind of texture the base, make it not just a smooth open area. And so initially the combination of stones, skulls, technical paint will cover most of the base. It'll then go and I'll be primed, and then I'll come back and do the rest of the base later on. So if we kind of have a look at where we are with the Warriors, they've had this approach. Their base, they had their skulls attached, they had the larger stones glued on, they had some technical paint applied, and they're all kind of ready for the next stage. So at the end of tonight, these will have the larger elements on. The Mawloc will have the larger element on. And once we go through our painting process, we'll start adding detail. And when we approach the basis for these guys, probably Wednesday, maybe later tonight, see how we go, we'll start seeing how all these elements start coming together and how we build up a more detailed base, just in a simple way. For my Space Marines, these are salamanders, they're walking on Mars. Slightly different approach. When it comes to it, we'll cover out how to do these fellas themselves. Right, so let's start with some skulls on the Mawloc. I get my usual couple of bits and pieces of tools. If you watch me doing modelling later on, when we do some of the builds, you'll see that I have a favourite set of tools and I use them almost exclusively, and they're just the bare minimum. But you know, they do 99, 95, 99% of your jobs. So first of all, glue. Tamiya extra thin, awesome stuff. It's aggressive but controllable. It sticks things together very, very well. I swear by it, it's awesome stuff. I use it for scale modelling, I use it for the vast majority of my Warhammer 40k builds. For plastic models, it's great, it's absolutely awesome stuff, and I wouldn't use anything else. For the construction, some people glue items together with super glue. Not for me. It doesn't give for me enough control. With this stuff, you've got a little bit of leeway. You put it in, you can let it set, and even up to an hour, if you realise you made a tremendous mistake, you can still pull the stuff off and reset it later on. So anyway, swear by that as a glue. Pair of side clippers. These are Xuron. I find these absolutely great. I wouldn't be without them. You can do so much prep work with a pair of clippers, pair of side clippers, taking things off the sprues, taking off nasty nubs that are left over from the process. I use a modelling knife. This one's actually a Swan Morden scalpel with a number... Oh, what's my blade number? I think this is a number 7 blade. It's got a very fine point that you can use for items, straight line. I use it to take seams off the models like that. I also use it to maybe take nugs off as well from the process. So again, useful for me. These two side clippers and the modelling knife do so much of my work. And then a sanding stick. So I've got a whole bunch of these. These ones are a flexible one, so they help with curved areas of a model. Help get a nice smooth over kind of sanding finish. Again, I'm using it for large seams. Or if I've done some filler work, I can use this to help just take the filler down back to the level. I also use nail emery boards that you can just get for your fingers for doing sanding. They're great as well, and they are dirt cheap. You pick up packs of 10, 20 for a couple of quid down at the supermarket, and they're brilliant. It's sandpaper on a stick, easy to control, wonderful things. Right, so let's get on. Let's have a think about what we're going to put into this base. So for my mix of larger stones and other elements, I do have some 3D printed, whatever they are, the smoke stacks, what have you. We'll get one of those on and see if I have an couple of interesting size, mid-size stones that I've just picked up from the ears. Get these on. Those are some of the larger ones. I'm just going to pick that one. So we don't want to overdo it. Put those to the side. And I'm also going to use some railroad talus. So this one is an old Woodland Scenics, as it says here. It's C1271 medium buff. I got a bag of this 15 years ago. I put it in an old Damian jar, and as you can see, I've used less than half of it over those years. A couple of stones from this will just sit nicely on the base of the model. I do have some different size and smaller ones, but those may come out later when we do a little bit more activity. So let's just put a few of here for a moment. We'll pick those up. Put that to the side. And finally, let's pick a couple of skulls to work with. He's a big fella, so why don't we go with a big skull? Got a nice orc skull here that he could have consumed. Fungi and mushrooms and all jokes along those lines. And let's go for a smaller human skull, of which we have hundreds. Let's pick another one to match that one. There we go. So these are the major elements that we're going to be popping into the base. There will be more details. We'll add grass tufts and all of the great stuff later on. But first of all, first stage is that. So let's tidy up all bits of skull. Let's take off the flash. Let's work away from our joint. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit so we'll get a better view. Because these things are like pieces of dust. I use my smooth standing stick and just take off that little connection point. So of course I use Citadel Games Workshop skulls, but there's a whole bunch of different ones you can get from around the various suppliers. Or if you're fortunate enough to have your own 3D printer, there's some STLs you can get and download. Just print off a couple of thousand of your own and you'll never ever need to buy any again. We don't need to do a lot with these fellas. They are just going to be a bit of decoration in the base. If we're not happy with it, we can always hide it with a little bit of grass tufts or something similar. This is the point where you lose things to the carpet monster. So with my big fat sausage fingers, keeping hold of these things can be fun sometimes. that's done, let's just finish him off. Then we've just got the last bit of a skull. Get this one sorted. Then we can get these stuck on. And here's probably when I progress and I find that my super glue that I'll need for the rocks and other bits is dry as a bone. Oops. And I'll have to throw it away and find another alternative one. But hopefully, when I bought my super glue, I bought a second tube as well. Let's carry on and see what we come up with. Right. Looks about done. That's a bit rough on there, that needs a bit of a sand. We just find the nail file. So just a very straightforward, simple emery board nail file that we use. That's all good. That. The work is all flat there. That's all good. I almost forgot. Just what I like to do with these bases is every so often there's just a little bit of flash that is around the base. So I just like to just run my blade across that. Just take off that little bit of flash, just make sure it's smooth as the rest of the model. It can be easy to forget that the base itself is just another bit of the model. It's another bit of cast component. You can suffer from all the same problems as any other one. A bit short sometimes. Can be a bit of flash. Let me just do this and just make sure we have no surprises when we come to the painting. There we go. All good. Right, we're all good there. So let's find our super glue. Still soft. So for my super glue, I've used this brand for a little while now. Again, really quite enjoy it. It's really good. UK based, but X-Pro super glue. I use a gel. I find it a bit more controllable. Really great stuff. We'll stick this down. There we go. So, trusty pair of tweezers. Time to get started. Right, we're going to do the skulls first. Skulls can be quite an interesting centre point to the model, so we try not to hide these away too much. So I'm going to pop the human skulls in the middle here. So let's get a dollop of extra thin. I know it's going on thick, let's not worry about this. with where they are. Bit central, bit obvious, but never mind. And then I touch those in again with a bit more extra thin, a bit of capillary action, drag that glue right under the models. That'll lock them there. That'll be fine for a bit. And then where are we going to put our orc head? Let's have him a little bit under the tail. A little bit around here. He's big enough. I don't think he tweezes too much. There we go. Give him a little settle. And touch that in with some old tummy thin. Make sure that he's locked in. Don't worry about what this does to the base of the glue. We'll be putting plenty more elements over the top of that black base before we're anywhere near finished with it. Right, so those are the only elements that need tummy thin. Make sure it's closed. Put it off to the side. Next up, I'm going to do some super glue. So I've got an old business card here. I'll put a little bit of my glue on. Don't need much of this, make a little splodge. And we'll come and make sure that that's all cleaned up in a moment. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on our Tyranid, whatever it's called. I'm going to get him near the base as well. I want him a little bit pointing away from our orc head, but in the same kind of rough direction. And there we go. Right. And then next up, we're going to put a couple of stones around. So I'm going to use a larger one first. Find out which is a good way to orientate it, you know, where does it look natural to settle. So I might need a bit more glue there in a minute. Oops. It's quite a large one, so we'll get him not far off from there as well, just to put some detail around there. I'm just going to put a little more glue on the card. Then we're going to just put some smaller stones. We're going to scatter them around. So we're going to start off with some of the talus first of all. Pull in a bit of glue, pop it down. It can be quite hard to make these things look natural. You know, there's a tendency to put these things in a kind of very symmetrical pattern. So if you can try and mix it up as much as possible. Try and be as natural as possible by spreading these around, you know, group a couple together, spread them out. Because this fella's got quite a big base, we do need to put quite a few around just to help break up a lot of the detail. We have a large one as well. There we go. Now don't also worry about the colour of these things, these are all going to get painted over, so there's a consistency between all of these models at the moment. For when I have been painting so far, they have all been exactly the same colour as the ground, but I'm experimenting a little bit with some granite colours. If that works on some of the testing I'm doing, then you might see a slight variation, help break up that base a little bit more. Might need a little more glue on there in a moment. Just put a little bit more on. Let's get some around the back side here. We've not put too much around here. Couple of little ones together in a little cluster. One or two more, I think, and then we're probably okay. We could fill up some of the rest with the other various texture paints we'll use. The other elements that we can all bring together to just add a little more interest into the base when we come to it. It's just how are we doing? Oh, let's get something under here. How do we feel? Another one just in between those there, and then let's keep that large one for another day. How should we fit this fella? There's always a tendency to do one more. It could always be one too many. I think in this case, okay, we get that one in. Okay, and I think we are good for this. Sorry, it's drifted off a little bit. So, what we have here now, we've got a lot of bits of stone, a couple of skulls. There are other items that are all just mixed on here now. We're going to let that off to the side. Let that dry for a good hour or so, and then that'll get a wash, and I'll put it on the base, ready for handling and for priming soon. So when I get out and do my priming, that's when I do my varnish covers as well. So in a couple of days, once we've finished the bases of the Warriors, we'll all go out to the spray booth, which happens to be my garage, and we'll go through and get those things. Right, let me put them to the side. He's good. Let's make sure our super glue is good. Tighten it up. Make sure he's good for the next session. All spare stones, they can go back on their shelf. And the top on my other details. Right. So that's all good. Let's just put him out of the way where we're not going to cause any harm. Right, so we've done our first bit of priming, basing for our Mawloc. Next up, similar prep for these 6 Primaris Intercessors. I think these are from the No Fear 8th edition and the Dark Imperium 8th edition starter sets. So a bunch of these already. So again, some of these are probably pretty good. These guys have their barrels are already drilled. So a quick check to make sure they're all fine. And then we can do a little bit of work on the bases. Let's just check that we're fine, if I'm happy with them. So most of these are good. I'm quite happy with where I did the prep for these fellas. Barrels drilled, pauldrons up. Just needs a little bit of work to highlight the detail on this. It's a bit soft. So it's part of the problem with some of the single pose kits is there's sometimes a little bit of soft detail on some of the curves. And sometimes you just need to carefully work at it a little bit, just to highlight those edges. And certainly the pauldrons are one of those elements, you know, with their different coloured inside components versus the rim. If you have a nice clean line there, it does help significantly when it comes to painting. It's fine. It's been done already. Let's just take that a little more off. Good. For the most part, I think these guys, I spent a bit of time, I spent a bit of time getting these ready when I painted them, so they're all fine. This fella, however, I didn't prep him, and he has a little bit of work to do. So we've got some bits of area where he wasn't quite removed from the sprue well. So let's make sure those are all tidied up. And he is, let's be honest, in a really awful blue colour. We all know why that was, because you have your glorious ultramarines and your tabletop. Have them on blue, you're up and running quickly with some colours. So it's not too bad really, but there we go. Right. See what we can do around all of these. Won't be able to work a miracle because it's quite hard once they're all assembled. Doing the touch up in the prep while they're still new off the sprue helps considerably, because you can easily get to all the bits without having to worry about other parts of the model. At least the pauldrons are good. So we'll be painting these as salamanders. So as we get through to these, if I get through to these, if my lad doesn't paint them before me, I will go through the recipe for what he wants to do. Believe it or not, like my other stuff, it involves a lot of dry brushing. But they are much less finicky and much quicker to get to the tabletop than the Tyranids. The process for them, the number of different colours, is much less. It's a bit flat. So they do end up on the tabletop quite a bit quicker than the Tyranid ones. Right, I think this may be as close to being as good as I can get it on the seams. I'll deal with the rest of it during the painting. thing I haven't done is drill the barrel of this one yet, so let's give that a go. So my process for drilling barrels is not actually to drill the barrel. So I start with a very flat bit. I take the very sharp point of my modelling knife, I put it in the middle of the barrel. I make sure I get it in the middle. Push around a few bits and pieces until I'm happy it's there. That wasn't just that, it slipped. Then I spin it around and let the edge of the blade work out on the barrel itself. So I don't need to worry too much about a drill bit, and it makes the effect. If you don't want to drill your barrels out, a small black dot with a Sharpie or a bit of paint at the end of the processing will have a similar effect. It will just show that the barrel has a hole at the end, so their projectiles can actually come out. There we go. Probably can't tell, but good enough for what we need to do for these fellas. Just a bit more around the top to even it out. There we go. So, as far as I can tell, and as far as this is going to be, he is going to be good for our painting. Just a little bit, get rid of that. Yeah, he'll do. So, just the same as we did with our Tyranids, I'm going to do a little bit of basic detail on here. So for these guys, at the moment, I'm not quite sure my rock process. So these are really just going to get a couple of skulls, probably, what, 4 between the 6 of them. They don't all need to be the same. So I'll just get a few skulls, put them on, and again, they'll join the Mawloc for a wash. We're joining for a wash, and then a mount on a base, and then a prime. Let's a couple of these off. And those full schools. Full. So half. And my basic approach for Space Marines at the moment is slightly different from the Tyranids. As I said, I don't put in too many rocks on at the moment. I'm working on a process for that. But I may also, on some of the larger ones, work on a bit of kind of concrete pillars or things that will come out of there. But that's for another day. Right, let's tidy up these little bits of plastic. Same process as before. Bit of work with the modelling knife just to take the seams off. Sanding stick just to make sure that I've got a nice even finish to the model or the piece. Good. Let's put it to the side for a moment, move on to the next one. Games Workshop do sell an edging tool. I have to admit I've never used it, so I don't know if it's any good, but I'm more than happy with my scalpel modelling set. You can use like an X-Acto or a rip-off version of that for this activity. It's the same kind of thing, and certainly when you're putting your edge highlights on like this, getting your seams and that off, all you're really doing is just scraping away the plastic that shouldn't be there and just helping smooth out the model itself. Right, 2 more of these little buggers to go. Now I can stick them on the base, and that will probably be it for this evening. I think what I'll be doing is giving these a wash in some warm soapy water just before I go to bed, let them dry overnight. And certainly in the case of the Mawloc, there's a little bit of extra work we do before it goes into the prime, but we'll deal with that in the next session. Talking of which, the next session will probably be Wednesday, because we've got both international football with England tomorrow, plus it's a new week of assignment missions in Battlefield 2042, and both of those will probably take my evening. But hey ho. Let's just carry on here. Whoops. I was lucky. Oh, I think I might do one more. Let's get these ones on first though. I think our sergeant, is that what he is? I think our sergeant might benefit from it too. He's got a lot of space at the front of that model to fill. Let's pop a couple on there. Again. Nice pile of glue in the middle. That's 2 skulls. My tweezers. Because my sausage fingers are hard work at this one. The first one is there, and the second one, a bit of an angle. Just like that. Excellent, come and lock those in a minute. Some more. Let's use these 2, and then we will use him as a third. Those 2, they're going to get away with that one. So, move it off to the front of the side. This one I am going to drop sideways on. Skulls don't always have to stand upright. There we go. There's you. Put one towards the back on you. Just walked over him. Not a care in the world. I'll tell you what, let's do 2 more. It's not like we don't have many. Slightly crap one. And the regular one. Clean up again. I always strongly recommend cleaning your parts, all of them, before you put them together. Clean up the flash, take off the nubs from the connection points. It makes for such a better model. Then when you construct the model, when you put them together, also look to see if there's any gaps or seams, and then fill those again. You will get such a better model at the end of it if you spend a little more time, be a little more careful on your construction phase. It's worth the time. It makes painting a lot easier, makes your painting results so much better as well. Right, I think those fellas are done. Let's get that on now. So let's put you there. Make my life difficult seeing painting later on, but not to worry. We'll get you nicely settled there. A bit upright, so we can highlight that crack in the skull. And lastly, you got a nice bit of space at the side there. Right, those are stuck on, so what I'm just going to do now is put a little more glue around there and just let the capillary action drag it into the cracks underneath and just absolutely lock it in place, so we don't have those coming off during the rest of the basing process, or even worse, when it's finished in the middle of a game, to leave some horrible black bits on the base. Just touch the rest of these ones in. I'll take a moment. You didn't have one. And the last few. I said I'll let these dry. Probably now. Actually, I'll probably let these dry overnight. Super glue properly harden, let all that plastic glue settle in, and then give them a wash tomorrow, get the base and get them done. Right, that's it for this evening. We made a fair bit of progress. We've got our Tyranid Warriors all ready for basing work. We've got our Hive Tyrant heads finished, ready for sealing with varnish and then attaching to the Hive Tyrants themselves once they're painted. And then we've got our pre-basing work done for 6 Intercessor Space Marines and a nice big chunky Mawloc as a monster. Anyway, thanks for joining me once again. If anybody did, be good to people, be safe, be kind, don't be a dick, look after yourselves.